Mike, welcome. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah, great to chat with you.
Mike, you have built a career across marketing, teaching, and podcasting. What thread connects everything that you do?
I think the answer to that for me is curiosity. And I know I've given a couple speeches about this at work and other events. And when I think about marketing is how do you connect with a customer with your product, your solution, your goods, whatever that is. And then there's a little bit of that curiosity of how to best do that, how to best give them that message at the right time, at the right moment for that individual. Podcasting was purely a joke that I made that got asked to me if I would turn it into a podcast. And again, the curiosity in me just kind of took over, was like, that sounds really interesting and really fun. And same with teaching. I got asked to run a course for Butler University's New York sessions that they did. I had not really taught before, but it was in a field I was interested in. And so I built a course from scratch with the professors. And again, it was more of just like how can I do this? Can I do this? What's kind of the unique way to put this all together? And that thread of just being curious about how it all works, how these different things function, and then how would I do them and put my own flavor into it is kind of what is that unique piece that is the through line for me through everything.
I love that. What comes to mind is really that you're constantly stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? So everything that you have shared. So how does that feel? Does each one of these initiatives that allows you to step outside of that comfort zone push you to do and seek something different?
Definitely. I think for me, there was the point in my life is I moved from Indiana. I'm born and raised in Indiana. All my family's still there. I loved it there. I love it there still. It's a great town and a great city. And I moved to New York for my job. And I got, recruited for it. And I decided it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. But I didn't know that many people in New York. I didn't, I'd been a few times. I wasn't familiar with it. And I made it a point when I got here to say yes to everything, whether I knew I'd like it or not. And I remember it kind of put me in some funny, awkward positions at times and some like unique experiences that I don't want to do again, but I'm kind of glad I did. And once I did that for the first like 6 months of being in New York, and thankfully I built a pretty good network and group of friends that were willing to go with me on some of these journeys of random events and things that we were finding in the city, because a city like New York, there's always something going on. It made that, once I kind of broke that seal and started doing that for personal life and fun and stuff outside of work, it made some of the professional ones way easier, because I took the big risk of moving to New York for a job offer. But then all the other ones, it was much easier to say, yeah, it's easy to turn this podcast into a few episodes, or it's easier to say yes to those things when you are better at kind of assessing what the opportunity is, what the risk is, what you're giving up. And so I kind of always think back to those first 6 months in New York, really made it easy and easier for me to say yes to a lot of these other things, where now, my podcast is in theater. I didn't know a ton about it. I hated immersive theater when I got here. I was terrified of it. I did not want to be at a show where they're going to interact with you. And now I've gone to a couple where they are, as immersive as you can get. And it's a kind of a fun, unique thing. So I think a lot about all those different moments and how some of the low risk ones have led to making it easier to make the higher risk decisions.
Incredible. Would you be willing to share one of the crazy stories that you said yes to in the first 6 months while you're in New York?
I think the ones that stands out, and I have a good friend who I work with, who we've become very close, and we started at the same time in New York. We were looking for comedy clubs and live concerts and things to go to. And we went into, if you're familiar with New York, we went into Queens, and we took the train about 45 minutes out for this very small, what we thought was a much bigger event. And it was a comedy set with musicians and comedians, everything. And it wasn't the highest quality. And so we were one of about 8 people there, and it was not great, but really kind of fun. And we still joke about that time of when we went out, like way out of the city to go to this, what we thought was going to be this like underground cool event that ended up just being really a couple friends trying to do stuff that wasn't very well put together. So I think a lot about those. Again, low risk, like it's an afternoon, evening, night, and we left and we still talk about those.
Through all these experiences that you've had, what has been one of the most defining high moments in your life and what made it meaningful?
I think a lot about, as my experiences have grown and my network's grown, the opportunities I still get to do really fun and unique and cool events and experiences with my family and friends and close network. And, I think about all the different sporting events I've been able to go to with my dad, or bring my mom to theater experiences here in New York as a music teacher. And so those highs are always those kind of unique ones that stand out. I think most recently for the podcast, I worked the red carpet for Cats the Jellicle Ball's opening night. And 6 years ago, when I made the joke that ended up becoming the podcast, I would have never thought it would have led me to standing next to like People Magazine and Vogue and CBS's news station with a microphone, talking to this cast and crew and a bunch of people I've met over the years for this kind of, silly podcast that's turned into a thing. And that was like a really cool, unique experience and kind of a full circle moment of, I would have never thought I would have been in that lineup, in that line, and knowledgeable about this even 6 years ago when I made the joke. And here I am, kind of not just doing it, but also knowledgeable about the experience and being able to add something to this incredible piece of theater that's now on Broadway.
Wow, how incredible. And you know what I'm seeing, Mike? Beyond the curiosity and the beautiful stories that you have shared, I'm also seeing a common thread that is about connection, the human connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you're sharing, a lot of these experiences were shared, whether with family members or friends or people maybe that you just started getting to know. And it's really fascinating because a lot of the research we do around joy, what we've noticed across more than 45 countries, we were trying to see whether there's any distinct differences in terms of how people experience joy. And the relationship piece always stands out in terms of what elevates people's joy. And it seems like you clearly are on that path as well.
Absolutely.
Can you now share with us one failure that you have experienced and that has radically taught you a very profound lesson?
I struggle with how to like view failure, because I try to view failure as a not now, as in like that wasn't the right moment or that was a learning experience, and then try to almost assess what led to that not being the right moment, whether it was something I could have controlled or something that was out of my control, whether it's circumstances or other things. So I've definitely had a few in my career. I think one, there was a role I really wanted and was passed for it for a couple other people, and at the time it really stings and it hurts, and you look back and like, could I have done this differently? And I remember getting feedback from some of the people that did the interview process, and I got like wildly contradicting pieces of feedback. One person telling me do this, another person telling me do that. And I kind of looked back to like, it led me to the, what can I control in that process? And I ended up getting the next one, and it ended up being like a much better fit for me, and it worked out in the long run, even though that short-term pain of the couple months where I wasn't in the role I wanted to be in. And so I do think though, is like the mindset shift after that of, I brought what I could to that process. I felt good about how I brought what I wanted to that process. And if they didn't pick me, then it might be for the best. And then vice versa, like that led to me being picked in the one that ended up being a better fit. So I try to just make sure I show up and do my own. Like my biggest learning from that failure was, can I make sure I'm putting my best foot forward and then live with the outcomes? And there's been times where I've, didn't feel like I maybe did that, and then that's a learning for me. But other times, if I did that and I'm not the choice, then I can stomach it a little bit easier. And I think, again, it's led to a lot of some of these cool opportunities where some of them like, that's a unique thing that I'm going to get to do because I've put myself in that situation. And other times where it's like, I missed out on that opportunity. Maybe I could have done this differently to be part of it next time.
At the end of the day, indeed, you never control the final outcome of any decision or action that we take. And it's about living with no regrets. So
it's also especially for professional and career stuff, the in the moment is like really painful at the time. But I think it was only like 3 or 4 more months before I got the job. And when you think about the length of a career, I like, it's been so long ago, even with that it's like, it was a meaningless amount of time in the scheme of a career. And so it's that like letting go of a little bit of that moment and the like the pain at the time, knowing that in the long run, things will be okay. And I do think we have a culture of like, everything should be immediate and quick and fast. And that's built by the phones we have in our hands and being able to get access to information so quickly. But some of these things do take time, and that's okay for them to take time.
Yes, and what I've learned in the process is that the quicker you get to the acceptance phase, the acceptance of whatever has emerged, right? Maybe things didn't turn out in the way you had hoped, but the quicker you're able to just accept the situation as it is, the more doors and opportunities can actually arise later on. But that's a tough part. It's how can we make sure we don't stay in that dark spot for too long, and that we basically accept and then move on and maybe see life with a different perspective as a result of that experience.
Definitely.
Mike, you do so many incredible things. You also teach marketing. So tell us how AI is fundamentally changing what it means to be a great marketer today.
Yeah, it's so interesting talking about AI right now because it's so early still in this like the phase of where every time I try to chat about it with somebody or talk through something, it's not that much longer that everything I've just said was outdated. And it's moving at such an incredible pace. I think that like it's really hard to predict. And I know we're at this like forefront of the beginning of it, and there's these iterations that are going to keep coming. But I'm very much I think it's right now it is being like, it goes back to the curiosity of playing with it and seeing what it can do well and how it can help you. Some marketers have done that for creative, for brainstorming, for asset generation, but some also don't want to do that and want to have like a little bit more of that ownership. But marketing's been using AI for a while. The predictive marketing has been the foundations and fundamentals of how Google and Meta and a lot of these ad platforms have worked for a long time. So for multiple years, it's been kind of the models running what ads you see at what time and that whole thing. That's been AI, just not called AI as intently. But I think that the future right now is how people are harnessing what it can do for them individually and how it makes them even better at their jobs more than it is how it's doing things for them. And so, there's a ton of examples of where I've seen really creative asset generation, or I've seen really creative just brainstorming with AI. And then we're not even kind of at the point yet where all the agents are fully functioning, but it's just, there's so much that's going to happen, and it's going to happen quickly. And so it's how are you as a marketer testing stuff and trialing stuff and playing with it to harness and do some of the things it can do better than we can, and to make your life a little easier. So that way, when the next wave happens, you're ready to also try again and try the new thing.
What skill will matter the most in marketing in the future, in your opinion?
I think there's going to be a little bit of a couple things. And the thing that stands out is I think the human communication interaction is still going to matter. And so that to me is not going anywhere, of being able to talk to people and drive communication. I know AI is getting better at writing stuff and there, but you could tell right now, and maybe that changes again in a little bit. But I think right now it's going to be the people in marketing who are adopting or finding ways to help it amplify what they're doing are the ones that are getting ahead versus the ones that are just completely shunning it. And I don't know if I'm at a point where, I've tested and trialed a lot of stuff, both, obviously I use a lot of the products that Google owns with Gemini and Notebook LM and all the other types of things. I've played with a couple of the other of our competitors that are doing stuff as well. It's going to be some things work really well, and some things I've spent hours trying to figure out, and I could have just done it myself in 5 minutes. And so it is finding the right places to automate things that are repetitive in your life and to make it so you can be focusing more on things that matter in the marketing space. That is where I think AI can be in the short term helpful. Again, where in the long term, I don't even want to try to predict. There are a lot of people making predictions that know this way better than me, but I think there's probably a world where there's a lot more ability to, again, marketing is connecting the right message to the right user at the right time of why they need your goods or products or solutions. And that's not changing. It's just how do you deliver that message and what's that message look like? And so that is where this long-term evolution could stem.
Do you think creativity is becoming more valuable or more at risk in this new landscape?
It's hard to answer that because I think that there's still a lot of creativity and needed creativity. And especially in a world where I blur my marketing side and my work side is all extremely AI focused and AI centric and AI heavy. And then I do my podcast in the theater space where they are as anti as you can get. Right now they are aggressively trying to work against it. And I feel like there's probably somewhere in the middle that I would say of all this. I think that like if you're a playwright and you're the graphic designer on these things, like there's still a lot of value in that work, in that human built creative ability. There's also a lot of stuff that could be sped up that wasn't as needed in the process. And I think about a lot of the stuff in the theater world where I'd probably push them to use AI a little bit more that they are pretty much not wanting to use right now. And I think that that's going to be where, again, feels like it's going to be the part of the future. It's going to be part of where we're going. And it's about finding the right use cases for everybody in the short term. And then what does it turn into in the long?
As you're teaching marketing at university, what advice do you typically give students, particularly those that feel overwhelmed by all the options, the expectations, and even this fast changing world that we live in? What advice would you give them in terms of how they can more optimally thrive in the future?
Yeah, so I've had a ton of debates. I was on an advisory board for Indiana University for a little while, and there's a ton of debate about how to handle this at the university level because it is tough. Because there's, on one hand, there is the component of hard work that is a part of the college experience of like, how do you learn the material and sift through stuff? And then on the other hand, there's some stuff that I got my MBA at the kind of beginning of AI working where I was a little bit like, do I need to learn this? Like, I'm not sure that I need to know this anymore. And so I do think there's going to be a little bit of the universities needing to adapt and the students needing to find ways to where they need to like, what can they learn? What's going to be important for them to kind of grind through? So that way, when they get into a professional workforce, they know the skills they need to build and what are at the same times are the skills they need to build in the AI space that will allow them to come in and be better at their jobs quickly. We've said a lot, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, that AI isn't necessarily taking your job. It's whoever's harnessing AI, like the person using it is going to be the one that takes your job because they're doing it better than you. And I think that that's where I would tell students is you still have to build these skills. Like you still have to be able to communicate. You still have to be able to navigate if you're going a corporate office, and you still have to be able to do the work. And, you go from college with a little bit less intense of a schedule to not having breaks and being at work every day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week plus. And that transition is going to take some of the muscle of what I think college needs to build. But I do think the universities are going to have to adapt a little bit in what they are expecting and asking for of these students, in the same sense, knowing that some of these skills can be done very fast with AI and with precision, and how are they going to harness that? So that's kind of where it's been a really interesting conversation. And I've focused most of the conversations I have with students on like, what do they want to do in the long run? And where will this fit into that? And then how can they learn the other stuff and kind of like, again, struggle a little bit of their way through those things, because it's important to do that.
As you're building your curriculum to teach these students, because of the shifting landscape, it must be quite overwhelming for you to continuously update and change and evolve things. Although, as you said, there are certain elements that are still, at the core foundations of marketing. But has it been challenging for you to continue teaching marketing as a result of everything that has been happening over the last couple of years?
Yeah, the biggest shift I've made is I used to focus mostly on case studies that were published, that were, the traditional things you'd get in a college course, which is here's a case study that was done by Wharton or, UVA or one of these schools that have put together this published example. And I've moved away from that into articles that are a little bit more easy to flip in and out as stuff has changed. And that has been, I think, the only way to keep up, because you start looking at some of these published case studies and they're already outdated and they're 2 years old. And so I think that that's the key, is finding, there's a million newsletters to sign up for, whether it's the Morning Brew or the Wall Street Journal CMO Today or any of these things out there, to keep a pulse on what's happening. And I read a lot of them. It's helpful just to kind of stay in touch with stuff that's happening. But that's where I can find a lot of unique things to share with students, which is like, here's this cool way that this company did this. And then we can have a healthy conversation about how that fits into whatever topic the course is going to cover at the time, whether it's digital media or traditional media or however we're focusing that level of marketing.
Awesome. And let's talk about Your podcast, what drives you to keep creating the podcast, and what energizes you the most?
Yeah. So for if you haven't, the podcast is called The Wrong Cat Died. It is on everything you can find in thewrongcatdied.com. It is basically, I made a joke about Cats the Musical as someone who had only seen the Cats the Musical once. And it was kind of like a little poke on the plot of it. And it's turned into me interviewing people who have done the musical. And I have essentially captured a bunch of the history of this musical because it's been going on for 45 years. It's currently running in like 5 or 6 places. Like, it's kind of always happening because it's one of the biggest and largest well-known pieces of theater IP out there. What keeps me going is I just get to talk to so many unique people. Like, I interview people who have done a production of it, or have extreme powerful thoughts on it and are in the theater space. And we talk about the musical and the characters and the story, and then kind of my joke about, my thoughts on the story. And they're so fascinating conversations because nobody has a similar thought. There's a lot of like different of opinions on it. There's a lot of lore that's captured that's not like written anywhere. And so again, it goes back to that like really unique and curious thought of like, I didn't know anything about this musical, and now I'm learning from people who have done it and know a ton about it now. And again, it led me to this Broadway opening night the other night, and there's a version of it that's a completely reimagined version on Broadway that's happening. That's such an amazing production. And even that was something that, as they were building it out, I was able to kind of ask questions and give the cast thoughts on like, hey, here's how people think about this, and here's how people approach that. And so I've just loved it. It's one of those things that it doesn't feel like extra work when I get to do a conversation. And I record a lot of them. It's kind of timeless, so I can record a bunch and publish them on my own schedule. And I get to talk to people from all over the world because it just finished in South Africa. It's about to go into China and Southeast Asia. There was one in Australia recently. There was an international tour in Europe. So it's really cool to talk to people from different cultures all about this one unique, unifying, weird, strange musical that I've somehow become part of the lore of.
I love that. What have you learned about joy as a result of all these conversations with so many different people from all over the world?
Yeah, I think what's really cool is like the most famous song in that musical is Memory. And it started in the 80s. And I've talked to people that did it in the 80s, and then people have done it as recent as like a month ago. And it's so fun to hear and kind of bring up those memories of doing it and the things that they'll never forget. And the stories I get to hear from them are always the things that they're laughing about, the things that they'll like, the either mistakes that are kind of funny or these moments. And I think that's like a cool part is like I get to hear their joyful moments. And again, the people who did in the 80s, they haven't thought or talked about this musical probably in 30 years. And I'm the one that's kind of rehashing these deep-seated memories from their, when they were in their 20s doing this musical all over the United States or all over wherever they were doing it. And so it kind of brings me joy just to hear how joyful they were or how meaningful this piece of theater was in their life or their career. I've had families on where the father and daughter did it together. There's a lot that got married after being in the show together. So it's just such a cool thing to be able to hear different perspectives and how, again, it unites everything. And then the same thing for me with the fans. There's not a lot of agreement within the fan base on certain things. And it's fun that people are having those conversations. And like, there's this unifying thing that gives them joy, that they have a community to talk to that also found joy in this.
If there would be a recipe for living more joyfully, what would be the 3 main ingredients in your view and from all your life experiences to date?
I think just what we've talked about a lot today. So be super curious, go find fun things to do and like unique things to do, and go find people you like doing them with. That to me are the 3 things that have been, for me, what's led to a lot of these moments is some strange piece of curiosity led me to that experience I did with a friend. And then that's brought me a ton of joy. And so hopefully it's brought the other people I've done these things with a ton of joy too. But those would be my 3 ingredients.
I'm curious to know if along all these beautiful, fun, and enriching experiences that you've had, has your definition of success evolved through the years?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think it's hard to define success because there's like markers and milestones that you can have at any moment for all these different things. Careers, there's promotions and job titles and all that stuff. But there's also the intrinsic motivation of like what you want to accomplish. And I went a couple years ago, I stopped thinking about the annual ideas of like, I want to do this by the end of the year, like the New Year's resolutions, and more of, I want to learn more about this or test this skill. And I was being a lot more focused on, will that help me with that thing or not? And so my success wasn't necessarily that I have to get to this marker at the end of the year, but did I give myself opportunities to improve in that particular thing or not? And I think that kind of just mindset shift helped a lot for me of being more mindful of what I wanted to put energy towards, but then also removing the like, I think a lot about when we have these markers that we set for, again, a job or career, or like even just, I read a lot. If you like, I want to read 25 books this year, I would hate someone who read 24 books to be like, I failed. When it's like you read 23 books more than most people did, this year. And so I think it's getting away from that numerical thing. For me, like when I went on that reading journey, I didn't say I want to read 2 books a month, which was kind of my, like, I was like, that should be the goal. But instead I said, instead of watching TV at night, I want to read. And I just made it a point to like, I don't care how much I read or how much I get through that, but just make that change, that habit change. And I ended up reading like 75 books that year just by that change. And so that to me is like, that's where success can be. Like, how much can I commit to that? How can I stay true to that? Improvement of, for me, it was better sleep and life and just enrichment of it by making that change. So that's how I would view success, and how my mindset on success has changed, is not chasing necessarily a number or a title, but more so of like how I'm improving at whatever I'm trying to improve in throughout the year.
Yes, and how you're becoming better today than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and also, how do you ensure that whatever targets or pursuits you have, that they're actually your own rather than someone else's? Often, the pressure we may have within a family or within a community or certain cultures, really also having that self-awareness to seek and understand whether, is this truly what I want? Have you had those experiences in the past when you're younger? I'm curious, where you're debating as to whether some of the pursuits or goals that you were setting for yourselves were actually not necessarily aspirations that maybe you had on your own.
Yeah. I mean, I think early in any career, you have a view of what you want the next step to be, or what you want the 5 and 10 year path. I've always hated the like, what's your 10-year plan? I don't know if that exists as much anymore. And so I've always felt like, what's a 2-step plan? So if you're going to this next thing, where can that bring you after? And you don't want to get maybe too narrow or too stuck if you make that change. But that was something that when I was early in my career, I definitely thought a lot about. I was like, okay, I want to be here by this date. And I've now gone away from that and much more focused on, what does this allow me to learn? What's the skill I build? And what can I bring to make me better for whatever position that might be next after? Even if that's unknown, even if I'm not sure what that next step looks like. And I think that that's going to become really important, because again, when we look at the current landscape of the job market and what all of these new tools bring to the table, I don't know how to predict the next 5 and 10 years of what this looks like. And so I do think that goes back to, you have to just be curious and understanding what you're building and the value you're adding wherever you are. So that way, when this next iteration of whatever comes, you're ready to continue to do that in whatever the format looks like.
What would you say your life purpose is?
I'm not sure I would say this is a life purpose, but I like to add a lot of like thought and questions, and like really bring a unique kind of perspective to the table. And so I think, I'm not sure I'd say it's a life purpose, but it seems to be a common thread, which is like, a lot of times I'll ask a question that maybe somebody hasn't thought of or asked before. And that's how, like, my podcast, I know nobody asked the question before. Like, it was not a common question about this musical that I was asking. And now it's like, it is a question that people are debating. And so like, I do think that there is some fun in that, which is like, can you bring a unique perspective or bring something there? I don't want to say that's a life purpose though, because I don't want everyone to be like, oh, you got to bring something new. And I do think we're in a culture where being vocal and loud and maybe combative can sometimes actually be valuable on social media and in the internet, and that's not necessarily healthy. But I think done in a genuine and curious and fun way is really, really fun and unique. And I always try to hopefully bring a little bit of that to conversations and things I work.
Mike, from everything you have shared until now, is there one thing that you're still trying to figure out?
I think there's a lot of things I'm trying to figure out. So I don't think there's just one, but I think like a lot of what I've been saying about the AI journey, I am also trying to figure out. Like I spent more time than I'd like to admit today on a phone shortcut to try to make my life easier for a workout routine in the morning. So I think that there's a lot of that, of like what are we testing and playing with and toying with, and what are the ideas that we can have fun with and that will actually, again, be helpful for your life. So there's so many things. I have a list. I have a massive list of things where I'm like, I really want to do this. And I try to keep them in order of importance, where it's like, all right, that should be done and done quickly. And that's one that, like, on a Sunday when I maybe don't have anything going on and I want to sit on my couch and devote some time to it, that's going to be another day. But I think if you don't constantly have something that you're trying to figure out, I would strive you to go try to think through things that you should be, because now's the time where you can really customize and build things for yourself in a way that you couldn't easily before.
If you could give our audience a challenge that they can take on or pursue this week based on everything we have discussed, what would that challenge be?
I would say go find a friend, a family member, a partner, and go do something new and outside your comfort zone. Go to the show you wanted to see, or go to the thing that you wanted to do, or try a new restaurant, or they don't have to be these big, sweeping, difficult, expensive experiences. There are a lot of really easy and fun ways to do that, but you never know. I think that there's a lot of things that you might end up loving or trying, and if you hate it, you learn not to do it again next time. But that would be my challenge. Go find something unique and fun and cool and somebody fun to go do it with. And put yourself out there for at least one thing this week.
Mike, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. It was great to chat with you.